kao hrvatska obrambene industrije, gdje zahvaljujem ministru Anušiću i njegovim suradnicima koji su pozvali praktički sve proizvođače, sve vojne opreme koju se u Hrvatskoj radi, kako bi glavni tajnik stekao bolji uvid u sve ono što radi i taj segment našega gospodarstva i to izrazito izvozno orijentiran segment hrvatskog gospodarstva. Naravno da smo razgovarali i o brojnim sigurnosnim temama koje se odnose na svjetska zbivanja, na situaciju u našoj regiji i naravno situaciju nakon sastanka koalicije voljnih u Parizu, a to ćemo nastaviti i tijekom radnog ručka nakon ove konferencije za medije. Još jednom dobrodošao Mark i drago mi je da si s nama u Zagrebu danas. Hvala.
Well, thank you very much, Prime Minister Plenković, dear Andrei. Let me also acknowledge the presence of the two ministers. Good that you are here, and the Chief of Defense. Thank you for hosting me here in beautiful Zagreb. It's always a pleasure to be here. Since joining the alliance in 2009, Croatia has been a valued member of NATO. It contributes significantly to our collective security, not only on our eastern flank and in the Western Balkans, but across the entire alliance. Just before the holidays, I met Croatian troops in Poland as part of NATO's forward land forces in Bemowo-Picki. And it was inspiring to meet so many servicemen and women spending Christmas away from their families, standing watch, keeping us all safe. Croatia also contributes personnel to our forward land forces in Bulgaria and Hungary. And I welcome your efforts to modernize the capabilities of the Croatian armed forces and the way Croatia's defense industry indeed is stepping up, particularly in driving innovation in the field of uncrewed systems. I'm looking forward to the meeting, and you already announced it, this afternoon with representatives from the defense industry. And I was really impressed this morning to see how you have revamped Croatia's Air Force in just a couple of years. You are already spending more than 2% of GDP on defense and are working to reach the 5% benchmark by 2035, as all allies agreed at the summit in The Hague. And I also welcome that as of the 1st of January this year, the Croatian Air Force officially assumed full responsibility for protecting Croatian airspace. Croatia is also making good on the commitment allies made to sustain our unwavering support for Ukraine. Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, Croatia has been a strong and reliable supporter of Ukraine. In addition to your recent €50 million contribution to, indeed, you already mentioned it, the prioritized Ukraine requirement list, Pearl, Croatia has provided now over €300 million in military aid since 2022. You have supplied helicopters, transport aircraft, artillery systems, ammunition, protective equipment, and much more. Russia's brutal war of aggression continues, and we saw just last week the use of the Orashnik missile on Lviv and continued attacks on civilian and energy infrastructure. Russia is trying to deter us from supporting Ukraine, but we will not be deterred. As Ukraine faces immense pressure during the harsh winter, your support and the support of all NATO allies is more important than ever. Ukraine's security is our security. And under your leadership, Prime Minister Plenković, Croatia has truly been a vital partner to our Ukrainian friends. Croatia also plays an important role in sustaining stability in the Western Balkans. You are a long-standing contributor to KFOR, with more than 150 troops on the ground in Kosovo. The Western Balkans remain high on NATO's agenda, and our commitment to the region's stability is steadfast. With your support, we will not allow a security vacuum to emerge, and NATO will continue to strengthen political dialogue and practical cooperation across the region. Prime Minister Plenković, dear Andrei, thank you for your warm hospitality and again for Croatia's steadfast support to our alliance and everything we collectively stand for. Thank you.
Zahvaljujemo na uvodnim izlaganjima glavnom tajniku NATO-a, gospodinu Ruteu, premijeru Plenkoviću. Slijedi predviđeno vrijeme za novinarska pitanja. Uvažavajući naravno vaš veliki interes, ograničeni smo vremenom koje nam je na raspolaganju. Imamo vremena za nekoliko pitanja, evo krenut ćemo sa Jasmina Kuzmanović-Blomberg, izvolite.
Hello, question for
Hi.
Secretary General. Hi.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So, a group of European countries led by the UK and Germany are apparently planning to increase, or actually to have some military presence on the Arctic, on Greenland. Could you tell us more about these plans? Would it be like the Baltic Sentry of the last year initiative, or how would it look, and how far the plans have gone? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. And let me first of all stress that all allies agree on the importance of the Arctic and Arctic security, because we know that with sea lanes opening up, there is a risk that the Russians and the Chinese will be more active. And as you know, there are 8 Arctic countries, 7 are within NATO, including the United States and Canada, and 5 countries in Europe, including Denmark through Greenland and Iceland and Norway, Finland and Sweden. And then there is 1 Arctic country outside NATO, and that is Russia. But you could also argue that by now China has almost become a sort of Arctic country, not geographically, but at least by the sheer amount of their activities and interest in the region. So that has led last year already to some debates, very successful concluded debates in NATO on how, as an alliance, together with our 7 Arctic allies, we have to work together to make sure that the Arctic stays safe. And currently we are discussing the next step to that, how to make sure that we give practical follow-up on those discussions to make sure that as an alliance we do everything collectively and through our individual allies to make sure that the Arctic stays safe, as we all agree that that has to be a priority.
Hi.
Hi.
Also a question for you, Secretary General. My name is Anabela Lajko from the Croatian Radio. You have repeatedly stated that Russia is the main threat to NATO and to Europe, of course, understandably. We all understand why. What is your comment, approximation on latest statements from Donald Trump, who said that if necessary he will take military action on Greenland? And I'm just going to read it. Commissioner Kubilius from European Commission has said that EU members are obliged to come to Denmark's assistance under EU treaty if faced with military aggression. And as we know, 23 countries of EU are also members of NATO. Gospodine Plenković, including Croatia, yes. Gospodine Plenković, evo isto vaš komentar, molim na to. Hvala.
Yes, well, on that question, and it is a little bit, I think, repeating my previous reaction, but thank you very much for that important question. And I think what is at core here, and to the core of this question, is that we all make that same analysis, and there is no debate or discussion about that. The analysis is sound and is there that when it comes to the High North, the Arctic region, I was myself visiting Iceland only, I think, 6 or 8 weeks ago, and we also extensively discussed this, and I was in Norway and visiting other allies, discussing with the US and with Canada. I was with Prime Minister Carney last week in Paris discussing the importance of the Arctic. So collectively, as an alliance, and particularly, of course, the 7 countries who are bordering on the region, we do make this analysis that the collective defense is crucial. We all see that through changes in weather patterns that sea lanes are opening up. And we have to make sure that we do everything to protect that region. It is a vital part of NATO territory. And that is exactly why, where in the past NATO was not so much involved when it came to the Arctic, that since 2025, on the request by these 7 High North allies who are bordering on the Arctic, that NATO has become more involved. This has led to a few, as I said, very successful discussions within the NATO alliance with our ambassadors in Brussels and our ministers. We discussed this importance, and currently we are working on the next steps to make sure that indeed we collectively protect what is at stake here.
Evo samo još par riječi da dodam što se tiče ove teme koja se odnosi na Grenland i na Dansku i na signale koje čujemo iz američke administracije. Mi smo naravno U komunikaciji i sa danskom vladom i sa premijerkom Frederiksen bili smo skupa prošloga tjedna u Parizu. Ono što je važno, važan je ovotjedni susret prema najavama koji bi se trebao dogoditi sa državnim tajnikom Rubiom. Poruka svih praktički i saveznika i članica Europske unije ta da se saveznici moraju međusobno poštovati. To uključuje i odnos Sjedinjenih Država kao najveće zemlje u okviru NATO-a i najutjecajnije sa ostalima. Očito je i ovo što glavni tajnik kaže da postoje zabrinutosti sigurnosnog karaktera na području Arktika pod koji onda spada i Grenland. Međutim, siguran sam da se uz razgovore može pronaći rješenje koje će Sjedinjenim Državama osigurati sigurnost, a Danskoj upravo ono što svi poštujemo činjenicu da je Grenland dio Danske, premda nije u Europskoj uniji, ali je jasno da spada u njenu nadležnost i zato jedan kvalitetan dijalog ovakvu situaciju može po našem mišljenju riješiti na dobrobit svih i za opću sigurnost i to globalno.
Tamara Markovic, Croatian Television. Here.
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. Hi.
For Secretary General. So the new peace plan for Ukraine, the 20-point peace plan, mentions security guarantees similar to Article 5 from NATO. So my question is, if those guarantees resemble Article 5, why not give Ukraine the real deal, the real Article 5 and NATO membership? Are the doors of NATO closed for Ukraine? And za premijera Plenkovića, što vi kažete na te sigurnosne garancije i treba li Ukrajina u NATO? Hvala.
When it comes to NATO membership of Ukraine, there was a summit in Washington in 2024 which was very clear and restated in the specific words of that summit statement the irreversible path of Ukraine into NATO. So that was the political commitment in 2024 and that still stands. At the same time, we know that several allies, including Hungary and the United States and some others, are either against or very much doubtful about full NATO membership for Ukraine. That is a given, that is a fact. And at the moment, we have to deal with the situation in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia, particularly since the brutal, unprovoked onslaught of Russia against Ukraine starting in February 22. And what is being discussed now with the United States, with all NATO allies, within the coalition of the willing, led by and originally organized and led by the French and the Brits, is how, after a full peace deal / a long-term ceasefire, how to make sure that Russia will never ever attack again. And if it is then not NATO, what then? And that's exactly the debate which is now currently taking place. The US is very important here. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are playing a very positive role here, together with Marco Rubio, under the guidance of President Trump, who has broken a deadlock with Putin by starting to dialogue with him. And he had to do it. He was the only one who could do this, and I was very happy he did, starting in February last year. And last week in Paris, and we were both there, I think we made big progress on nailing as much as possible what those security guarantees will be in 3 levels. Level 1 being the Ukrainian armed forces. Level 2, a coalition of the willing organizing itself in such a way that it will help to build up the Ukrainian armed forces, but also functioning clearly collectively as, in addition to the Ukrainian armed forces, protecting, at least preventing the Russians from getting into a position where they want to attack again, but also the US being heavily involved in various ways, as we discussed last week in Paris. So we have these 3 layers. That was very successful. That is now being finalized next to everything which is needed when it comes to the reconstruction of Ukraine. And obviously that still leaves the very sensitive issue of territory. Very sensitive, where in the end it has to be the Ukrainian government taking the decisions on what they want to do, yes or no, when it comes to territory. But they need to know that whenever that moment comes, when they have to decide on territory, that they have the full backing, not only of their own armed forces, but also of this coalition of the willing, the United States, to collectively make sure that indeed the Russians will not repeat what they did after 2014, 2015 with the Minsk agreement, which is attacking Ukraine again.
Evo, ako mogu dodati par točaka na ovu temu jer je relevantna i u konačnici i sam sudjelovao na ovom sastanku koalicije voljnih u Parizu, čisto da malo pojasnimo koja je pozicija Hrvatske i što se u biti događa. Dakle, Sjedinjene Američke Države imaju snažnu želju da stvore preduvjete za mir. To je osnovna poruka predsjednika Trumpa i njegove administracije. Ona je zasigurno dobro došla i podržana je od svih. Da bi se taj mir osigurao, potrebno je da na njega pristane i druga strana, to je u ovom konkretnom slučaju Rusija, koja je agresor na ukrajinskom teritoriju. Evo sad će biti pune 4 godine ova zadnja faza agresije. U ovom trenutku imamo problem što Rusija želi najprije dogovore, onda prekid vatre. A cijela koncepcija koalicije voljnih i sve onoga što smo razgovarali prije par dana u Parizu je najprije prekid vatre kao prvi korak, a potom koraci prema mirovnom sporazumu koji po našem dubokom uvjerenju i na temelju specifičnog hrvatskog iskustva s ukrajinske strane nikada ne bi trebao biti takav da se Ukrajina i de jure odrekne svojih okupiranih područja. Jer to je ključna tema koja će ostati uvijek kao određena ili nagrada agresoru ili pak koncesija koju je jako teško politički braniti na unutarnjoj političkoj sceni. Zato je kompleksnost tog međunarodnog mirovnog sporazuma itekako zahtjevna. Istodobno što želi Rusija? Rusija ne želi samo da stvari ostanu onakve kakve jesu danas na terenu. Ona želi prije svega ponovno uspostaviti odnose sa Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama. Dakle, to je temeljni cilj gdje je situacija u Ukrajini samo jedan od instrumenata kako do njega doći. Nakon toga želi doći u poziciju da se režim sankcija koji trenutno postoji postupno skida i kao treći korak doživjeti punu rehabilitaciju na međunarodnoj sceni. Dakle, to su paralelni procesi koji se trenutno događaju. Pozicija Hrvatske je jasna. Više puta smo rekli da vlada je jasno kazala kako participirati na samom teritoriju Ukrajine kada je riječ o Hrvatskoj vojsci i pripadnicima naših oružanih snaga nije opcija, ali da ćemo jednako tako kao i mnoge druge članice koalicije voljnih nalaziti načine da pomognemo Ukrajini u ovoj situaciji kao što smo činili i do sada, bilo političkom potporom, bilo humanitarnom potporom, bilo energetskom potporom. Vlada je prošlog tjedna u dogovoru sa HEP-om donijela odluke da dio naše energetske infrastrukture koja se više ne koristi u našim elektranama bude donirana Ukrajini, gdje je veliki dio njihove energetske infrastrukture ciljanim i namjernim bombardiranjem u zimskim mjesecima uništen, gdje ljudi danas žive na -15, -20 bez mogućnosti da energetski sustav funkcionira, a njihovi eksperti su prepoznali da smo jedna od 2-3 zemlje koje imaju u potpunosti kompatibilnu tehnologiju koju smo stoga i donirali jer ovdje više nije u funkciji. U konačnici nastaviti sa bilateralnim paketima vojne pomoći jer samo jaka ukrajinska vojska u budućnosti može spriječiti neku novu agresiju na teritorij, jer podsjetimo se, imali smo 2014. pa smo nakon 8 godina imali 2022. A da ne govorim što za Ukrajinu, ukrajinski narod znači memorandum iz Budimpešte od prije više od 31-2 godine gdje su oni pristali da sa svog teritorija maknu cijeli nuklearni arsenal koji je tada bio 3. na svijetu kako bi im velike sile jamčile sigurnost. Nažalost, ta sigurnost se nije održala skoro 2,5 desetljeća kasnije i zato je cijela ta perspektiva sa jamstvima koja su nalik na članstvo u NATO-u po članku 5 itekako važna. U ovom trenutku je više nego jasno da ne postoji konsenzus saveznika da se Ukrajina primi u članstvo. Prema tome, odluka se donosi jednoglasno. Ako nekoliko zemalja to ne želi, onda su ove druge opcije upravo onaj oblik davanja snažne sigurnosne potpore Ukrajini u ovako teškoj situaciji.
Goran Latković, Nova TV. Pitanje za obojicu. Dakle, prije 4 godine u Zagrebu je pao dron, proletio kroz 3 zemlje članice NATO-a. Mene zanima kakva je razina sigurnosti NATO zračnog prostora.
Well, That's a very good question. And by the way, let me first of all commend Croatia for now taking over the control of its own airspace with the latest investments. And I was really impressed this morning to see with my own eyes the people operating that system and of course the gear you've bought from the French and from Turkey and from the US to indeed, for you to be able to control the Croatian airspace, but also to provide your help and when necessary and your support to other NATO allies wherever necessary and where you can do that. When it comes to drones, we have seen, of course, drone incursions last year in September in Poland. We have seen MIRT entering the airspace of Estonia a couple of weeks later in September. Whatever exactly was it intentional or not, at least it was reckless. And this is the reason why our new, relatively new, he started in July, but still relatively new, Supreme Allied Commander, Alexis Krinkovic, the general who is now leading NATO's military side, has decided to start with full support of the rest of NATO and all the allies, Eastern Sentry. And Eastern Sentry is making sure that we bring together, when it comes to, for example, drones and airspace incursions and protecting allied territory, brings together all our allies, all our capabilities from the Black Sea up to the High North to make sure, mirroring what we have done with Baltic Sentry, making sure that we are much more effective to control our airspace, to protect our territory on land, sea and air, but also to become better and better and better in implementing the latest drone technologies. We are learning here, by the way, from Ukraine. We have a joint NATO-Ukraine activity center in Poland, JTEC, where we analyze and train when it comes to all the insights from the war in Ukraine. And unfortunately, of course, this is taking place in Ukraine, but Ukraine is helping us to learn. When in Copenhagen in October, there were two big meetings taking place, the European Council informal and the European political community, and there were big worries about drones over Copenhagen. It was Ukraine, with support from allies in NATO, to help Denmark to be better in terms of understanding and also fending off those threats. So here we are learning from Ukraine, working with Ukraine, also to become better ourselves when it comes to drones. And I was really impressed this morning, again, when I saw what you are buying from Turkey in terms of drone technology. And of course, you have your own, when it comes to drones, your own industry here in Croatia, which is commendable.
Evo samo par riječi, dakle u odnosu na onu situaciju koju smo imali prije nekoliko godina, to je 2022. Hrvatska u ovom trenutku raspolaže sa višenamjenskim borbenim avionima Rafale koji imaju sve sposobnosti koje MIG-ovi u tom trenutku koje smo imali nisu imali, a to je sposobnost da u okviru našeg čuvanja, dakle air policinga hrvatskog neba, imamo sposobnost reakcije praktički u maksimalno 15 minuta od bilo kakve dojave. Naravno da nakon one situacije cijela suradnja koja je i na razini NATO-a sa središtem u Torrejonu je dignuta na višu razinu, što znači da iz onih zemalja otkud bi eventualno takva letjelica dolazila, da je njihova spremnost viša nego što je bilo tada, pa i pravovremeno prepoznavanje takve prijetnje, čime mislim da smo i sa našim radarskim sustavom, koji također ide u veliki proces novoga investiranja i njihovoga dizanja razine sposobnosti, u boljoj poziciji nego što smo bili tada.
Zna li se možda otkud je taj dron doletio, jer hrvatska javnost još uvijek nema informaciju otkud je doletio taj dron?
Kako nema? Ima informaciju, došao sa teritorija Ukrajine, da je preletio Mađarsku, pa to smo rekli ne znam koliko puta. A da nam u tom trenutku odgovarajuće službe na mađarskoj strani to nisu signalizirale, jer ga nisu ni one dobro vidjele tada, jer ga nisu ni očekivali.
Thank you. If I just may briefly follow up on my colleague's question, where exactly from in Ukraine, and who was the one who shot the projectile? Do we know that now? No, we don't know that. NATO doesn't know that. Okay. My question goes to Secretary General, but of course, Prime Minister, you're more than welcome to offer your perspective. Secretary General, can you recall a larger internal crisis that NATO has faced than the one the alliance is facing now, with Donald Trump saying we should go to Greenland and, take it? Or do you even see that as an internal crisis? Or is it not a crisis at all? And is the best way of communicating with Mr. Trump and trying to maybe smooth the relationship is the way that you have been using communication so far, which was basically flooding him with compliments and calling him daddy? Thank you.
Yeah, let me start with challenge you a bit on the second part of your question. What I always do is when people are helpful for the alliance and are doing good stuff, and I believe that Donald Trump is doing the right things for NATO, by encouraging us all to spend more, to equalize this, what the US is spending. We had a very successful summit in The Hague, where we decided on the 5% defense spending, including 3.5% on core defense. I'm absolutely convinced without Donald Trump, we would never have had that result at the summit in The Hague. We have now the whole of the alliance on this famous 2%, which we announced in 2014 in Wales. I'm absolutely convinced without Donald Trump, we would not have the whole alliance at this moment on the 2% and now working towards the 3.5%, incredible steps. So when I praise somebody, it is based on facts, and I believe the facts are there. We might disagree, but that is how I see this. As NATO Secretary General, it is my role to make sure that the whole of the alliance is as secure and safe as possible. And I applaud the fact that our colleagues who are bordering on the Arctic have come together, have worked together, and have decided to get NATO more and more involved. This was the discussion in Brussels I referred to in answering a few previous questions. Earlier last year, in September, and other moments last year when they discussed the High North. And we are now building on that. You've seen some announcements by the Brits and the Germans today. We are working now together to see how we can basically together as an alliance, including our 7 members, our allies bordering on the High North, on the Arctic, to work together to indeed build that next step, which is crucial. That's the United States, that's Canada, that's Iceland, Denmark, and the other European countries bordering on the High North, all 7, but of course with the whole of the alliance. By the way, as we speak, we see Denmark at the moment already speeding up their investments when it comes to defense, not only generally, but also when it comes to unique capabilities to defend territories like Greenland. So they're buying more F-35s, they're working on air-to-air refueling, they have bought these P-8 Boeings, the long-range drones, billions invested there in American equipment necessary to defend Denmark, NATO, but also territories like Greenland. So we are really working together here. And my only worry is, how do we stay safe against the Russians, against any other adversary? Look at what China is doing in rapidly building up its own armed forces, but also North Koreans and others who might wish us ill, and not well at least. And therefore, that's my role, and I think we will get there. No, not at all, and I think we are really working in the right direction here.
Pa pratimo ovu situaciju, mislim da smo kao odgovorna saveznica NATO-a uvijek jedna od onih zemalja koji itekako